Welcome everyone, and thanks Rachel for that. So welcome to this talk on flower insect timed counts. So just before I begin, I just want to introduce myself. So as Rachel said, I'm Dr. Michelle Larkin and I'm the Pollinator Monitoring Scheme Officer here in the National Biodiversity Data Centre. So I look after the Irish Pollinator Scheme as well as the Flower Insect Timed Count Scheme. So today I'm going to talk to you all about this wonderful scheme and how you can get involved and some little tips and tricks to help you along the way. And I suppose I'll just take myself off the screen there. So I suppose the best place to start would be exploring exactly what the scheme entails and what it's about. So fit counts were first developed by the UK Pollinator Monitoring Scheme. This fit count is a citizen science initiative developed to be a kind of a simple and quick way of tracking the numbers of flower visiting insects. It also allows us to gather information on plant pollinator interactions. And what we mean by this is when an insect lands on a flower, they will have the potential to pollinate it as they might come in contact with some pollen on the plant. So in terms of what the data for the fit counts would be used for, we would be collecting this data to track kind of the changes in numbers of flower visitors and plant pollination interactions across a variety of habitats. Also track this change across the survey season and across years as well. And if you're if you're working with the All Ireland Pollinator Plan and you're doing measures to help insects in your area, be it on your business, campus, on school grounds, as part of Tidy Towns or a community action plan, fit counts are an excellent way to be able to track your progress and see how it's impacting the insects that visit the flowers within your area over time as well. And then finally, once we kind of build up a nice data set of fit counts, we should be able to statistically analyze the changes in abundance and figure out, are these changes in the populations due to natural fluctuations or is it part of an ongoing trend? So before I kind of get into the nitty-gritty, first we should get started. So all the information I'm going to be talking about today will be on our website at biodiversityireland.ie/survey/fitcounts. Rachel will probably have a link to this in the chat. So on this website, we'll have all free to download guides. We also have a newsletter that kind of discusses the results that we had from the fit counts last year. We have a recording sheet that people can download and use when doing the fit counts, or we have links to download the app that's available from either the Google Play or Apple App Store. So once you download the app, it's absolutely fantastic. It'll bring you through step by step the entire process. So once you download the app, you can register and set up a profile. You can do this as an individual person if you're just interested to see what's happening in your garden, or you can set up your account or your profile with a group email address. So let's say if you're part of Tidy Towns community group or even businesses, you can set up a profile where everyone has access to the same profile, so you can store all the data you collect in the same place, and you can download all your data into Excel as well. So it's very, very handy. I would highly recommend people use the app. So in terms of, before we kind of go out and start doing insect counting, you should set up what we call an observation plot or /quadrat. So basically for the fit counts, we record everything that's within a 50 by 50 centimeter plot. These can be very easily made from materials like duct tape, string, wooden sticks, cloth, etc. The picture here on the left, I made an observation plot from muslin cloth there, so it's very easy to make these plots. Duct tape is probably going to be the handiest. So what you would do is, like, for each side of the quadrat, you can cut out 4 strips of duct tape around 54 centimeters long to allow for overlaps at the corners. Then you fold like each strip back on itself so that it's no longer sticky. And then you can use another small piece of duct tape to reinforce the 4 corners. So then you can just pop it into your pocket, into your bag, so you can do a fit count on the go. So in terms of how to get in or how to actually do a fit count, just to reiterate, anyone can get involved. You don't have to be an expert in identifying wildlife or insects. So anyone from even kids, it's a great way to get kids interested in wildlife recording. So you can do it as part of a school initiative. You can do it as yourself for just a personal interest. You know, if you're part of the groups or like a business, you can do this fit count, no bother at all. So in terms of how often, it's as often as you'd like from April to September. So this is the first day. So it seems to be quite a nice day today. So hopefully we'll be able to all get out and do some fit counts maybe, you know, during the break, because it'll be 1 o'clock straight after, or even after work. So you can do this, like if it's going to be part of an action plan, you could do it weekly, you could do it monthly, it's completely up to yourself. Ideally, we do like when counts are repeated over time in the same location or very nearby. You can use different flowers at different times of the year in that area, but it just would add a little bit of extra value to your data. But you know, once off fit count as well is also just is useful to the project and will be used in our analysis. So whatever you'd like to do yourself. In terms of where you can do a fit counts, basically anywhere where there's flowers blooming. So like your garden, farms, parks, schools, bogs, you know, if you have hanging baskets, flower beds, absolutely anywhere where it's safe for you to do so, or you have permission to access that area. So you could even do it on nature reserves. So the location isn't an issue as long as, you know, it's safe to do a fit count there. In terms of weather, so warm and dry during daylight hours. So what we'd usually ask people to do is, if the sky is clear of clouds or there's only a few clouds in the sky, you can do a fit count at around 13 degrees. If it is overcast or there's quite a lot of clouds up in the sky, we'd ideally ask people to do the fit count when it's around 15 degrees or more. So once you have all that set up, you're just like, I'll find a patch of flowers, you place your quadrat or your plot within a patch of flowers. Make sure to take a photo and count the number of fresh flowers. I'll be going, just to reiterate, I'll be going through all this later on in the presentation. So I'll be going into a bit more detail. So once you have your plot set up, you count all the insects that land on your chosen flower species during the 10-minute period. And then after the 10 minutes, you can submit your data. So what flower can you pick? So we have a list of 15 target plant species that we'd preferably like you to choose. Now, if none of those target flowers are available, you can by all means use any other plant species that's flowering at that time. So if there are a lot of species in your plot, just make sure that you only focus on one plant species at a time. So you can see here in this plot, we have the, we have the dandelions, but we also have daisies here. So when you're doing your fit count, you either focus on the insects that are visiting the dandelions or the daisies. You should always take a photo of the whole flower patch and not just one individual flower. Now you can take numerous photos and you can easily upload them on the app. You can also, if you're using the recording form, you can upload them onto our online system as well. And so just as long as you have a photo of the whole plot, and if you're not 100% sure what the plant species is, you can always take a photo as well of an individual flower, just so that I can have a look and see if I can identify it for you. Yeah, so I'm going to choose the dandelions, so I'm going to ignore the daisies for that fig count. So these are the list of the 15 target flowers. So all these species are common and relatively easy to find and identify. So at the moment, dandelion and buttercups are out at the moment. So if you want to try out the fig counts, I'm sure there's probably a dandelion patch close to you. You can test out the fig counts there as well. So a lot of these species will be grown at certain times throughout the year, but it allows us to be able to get fig counts from different flowers that are blooming April until September as well. So we have our buttercups, the dandelions. We also ask people to do fig counts on bramble, hawthorn, lavender, red and white clover, thistle. So you don't need to identify the thistle species. You can just put it into the group thistle. White dead nettle, ragwort. Again, you don't need to identify it to species level. You can just put them all under the group ragwort. It's the same with knapweeds, heather, then there's butterfly bush, hogweed, and ivy. So in terms of when you've set your plot, you've decided what plant I'm going to be doing the fig counts on. So the next step is to count the number of flowers. So you count the number of individual flowers in your patch by what we call a floral unit. I'll describe that a little more in the next slide. It's important that you don't count dead flowers, seed heads, or closed flowers. Only count fresh, open flowers. So here in this picture, you'd ignore the seed heads and any flowers that are closed. So different flowers will have different shapes, which we use to help make counting flowers a bit more straightforward. So what we do is so based on this flower shape, we can categorize them into one of four main floral unit groups, just to make it a bit easier for you to be able to count them. So the first group is individual flowers. So each flower will count as one unit, so one floral unit. So you can see here with bramble, buttercup, primroses, so they would all be counted as one group. So here in the primrose, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 primroses here. So 7 individual flowers. The next is flower heads. So this is when there's lots of tiny flowers and they group together to form kind of a larger flower head. So you can see here with the picture of the white clover. So everything that kind of looks like petals, they're actually mini little flowers that we call florets. And these florets will group together to form a larger flower head. And bees and other insects can easily land on it and it can support their weight. So we group all those together. So this whole white clover here with all the florets grouped together, we'd count that as one flower head. It's the same with knapweeds and dandelions as well. Next is the flower umbels. So these are for all the flowers all the small flowers will group together to form a little structure that kind of looks like an inside out umbrella that we call an umbel. So you'll see this a lot with our carrot family, with plants like yarrow. So you can see here on the second photo of the hogweed. Sorry, I'll just get the pointer. And so you can see here there's 1, 2, 3, and I think there's a fourth one here. So these would be all counted as 4 umbels for the common hogweed here. And then finally, we have the flower spikes. So these are any plants that have a main stem, and out of this main stem small little flowers will pop out. So you'll see this a lot with self-heal, and the yellow rattle, heathers and lavender as well. So you can see here for the yellow rattle here, that would be considered one spike instead of having to count all the little individual flowers along that stem. And it's the same with this self-heal here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 flower spikes for the self-heal. It just makes counting them a lot easier. So don't be too worried if you're not sure what to categorize them as. I can always, change it if needed. But just to let you know that if you're using the app, if you select any of the target plant species we have, it'll automatically set it to the correct floral unit. It's only you'd have to set it to the a floral unit if it's another plant species. So here are some examples of some ficam plots. So here we have dandelions and daisies again. So I'm going to focus on the dandelions. So we'll have the 6 flower heads. So each of these heads are composed of those tiny little florets grouped together. Here we have some hogweed, and I'd count this as 2 umbels. I know it's quite large, but it makes it a lot easier even for analysing the data. And then finally, we have some bloody cranesbill here, and it would be 7 individual flowers like you'd see with the hawthorn, blackthorn, and so on. So what happens though if you have a ficant plot and it's absolutely chock-a-block full of flowers? So don't worry about that at all. You can estimate the number of floral units for that particular plant. So you'll see this probably quite a lot when lavender and heathers are flowering. It's the same here with the blackthorn. It's quite all right to estimate the number of floral units for that plot. Just make sure you take a photo of the entire plot so that I can have a proper look at it. But an estimate for these types of plots is completely fine. So we have, that's all the plants. So we're going to actually start the fit count. So what you'd do is you'd start your 10-minute timer in the app. There's an inbuilt timer, so you don't have to keep the time yourself. But if you're using the recording sheet, you know, it's just handy to have your phone or a stopwatch to count down the 10 minutes. One thing I will mention though is when you're counting insects on your plot, just make sure you don't cast a shadow over the plot, as that can scare off some of the insects and bias your results. But once you start your timer, count all the insects that land on your chosen flower species during that period. And they have to land on the fresh open flowers. Don't count any of the insects that might be on other parts of the plant, like their leaves and stems. So only when they're actually on the flower themselves. And a great thing about this is that you don't have to identify anything to species level. Everything is grouped into broad insect groups. So I'll get into those in a minute. But another thing I'd just reiterate or kind of focus on is if there's a bumblebee or any insect that comes into your plot and then visits one dandelion and then flies to another dandelion, you'd still only count that as one insect. If you see one flying out of your plot and then coming back into your plot, that would still be count as one. Now, if you do have a lot of insects flying in and out of your quadrant, it can be very difficult to keep track. But don't worry about that at all. Just do your best to count every insect that visits your target flowers. It can be very hard, especially if it's quite a busy area for insects, you know, to keep track of all of them. So these are our broad insect groups. Some are fairly obvious, like the honeybees and the bumblebees and the butterflies, but others can be a bit more tricky, like the solitary bees and the hoverflies. So just to let you know, we do have plenty of free resources on our website that you are free to download and print off if you want for your first fit count. So you have a hard copy there, so you can just go through the different groups. But also the app has inbuilt ID guides as well. So the broad insect groups are bumblebees, honeybees, solitary bees, wasps, hoverflies, other flies, butterflies and moths, beetles that are larger than 3 millimeters, all small insects that are below 3 millimeters, and other insects. So I'll just briefly introduce each of these groups here. So before I get into that, these are the ID guides you'd find within the app. So if you click on the little beetle icon here, it'll bring up all these ID guides. So if you're not 100% sure of a particular group, we have all these ID guides saved for you to use. So with the app, I wouldn't worry, like if you're out in an area and you don't have access to the internet, the app will still work. You can still do fit counts. It's just when you come back and you get access to Wi-Fi or anything or internet, you can then upload your ID guide, or not your ID guide, your fit count record. Sorry about that. So these are the groups. So we have the bumblebees here. So these are you've probably seen a couple of queens. So these are the big, large furry bees that are flying around at the moment. So just to kind of remember that not all bumblebees are black and yellow striped. We do have a number of different bumblebee species that look quite different. So we have ones that are nearly completely blonde with a red back. We have pure black bees with a lovely red tail. And of course, we have our yellow and black bees as well. So you don't need to identify them to species level, you can just put them all down as a bumblebee. And just to be able to recognize a bumblebee, like all bees, they'll have very long antennae and they'll have eyes on the side of their head. And this is an important characteristic to look at when you're trying to distinguish them from other insects that might mimic bees. So for example, we have hoverflies here in Ireland that will mimic the look of bees, and they can be very good at their craft. But if you have a look here, you can see that their antennae here are quite short and stubby. Some of them can actually be quite feathery, but when you compare it to a bee's lovely long antennae here, it's quite distinct. But also they'll have those typical fly eyes where they have quite large eyes and it takes up nearly the majority of their head, whereas bees' eyes are restricted to the side of their heads. So in terms of honeybees, we only have one species of honeybee here in Ireland, but there are a number of different subspecies that you can find. So depending on the subspecies, their abdomen can vary from bright orange stripe to nearly all black. As with the bumblebees, their eyes are around the side of the head, and they may also have a pollen basket that you could see with the workers. So I'm just going to go back to the bumblebee here, and just to show you. So on the back of their leg, they have quite a flat surface, and when they're collecting pollen, they'll roll up all the pollen and slip it into this little pollen basket. So you can see this one has collected quite a lot of pollen, and it just makes it easier for her to transport it back to the nest. So honeybees will have something very similar. So sometimes you might see them carrying a lot of pollen on the back of their leg. But this orange stripe pattern is very distinct for honeybees. So solitary bees are quite a diverse group. The majority of bees we have here in Ireland are solitary bees. They can be much less hairy than bumblebees, but will have some hairs. Honeybees could be mistaken for them, but honeybees tend to be quite larger and will have that distinctive dark or orange striped abdomen. So you can see here we have quite a variety of different bees. Some of them can be very, very small, whereas others can be quite large, like the ashy mining bee here. That will be actually coming out soon enough. And then finally we have our wasps for kind of like the Hymenoptera group. So with wasps, they can be we're all kind of fairly familiar with the social wasps. So the black and yellow markings are very distinctive. But we do have other species of wasps here, like solitary wasps, parasitic wasps, etc. So although the common social wasp is easy to spot, there are some solitary wasps that might be difficult to distinguish or tell apart from solitary bees or even honeybees. So they're much less hairy than bees and will never have a pollen basket. They of course have the long antennae as well, but the main structure that you'd look at is actually their waist. So bees will also have a waist, but wasps have that very cinched, tiny little waist that's very distinctive. So all wasps, whether it be social or solitary wasps, will have that distinct characteristic. And then sometimes if it's a bit more hard to see, you can also look at their head. They do tend to have more of a rectangular head compared to solitary bees. So I'll just go back here. You can see some of the waists here for some of the solitary bees. They're there, but they're not as cinched as the wasps. Um, and then we have our hoverflies. So these are considered probably the second most important pollinator group after bees. So these are aptly named. They can hover in the air, usually over a little patch of flowers. Uh, like other flies, they have large eyes covering most of their head, and they have very short and stubby antennae. So you can see here, like just to even tell them apart from other bee and wasp species, you can see the antennae can be quite short. So with this species here, you can see it's a very good wasp mimic, and it looks like it has long antennae, but it's just elongated. It wouldn't be as long as the other bee and wasp antennae, but you can also see the fly eyes, really, the eyes that are taking up most of their head. So they can come in a variety of different shapes and sizes and can be very, very colourful. So some can be shiny and black, but a lot will have some yellow or other pale markings. So the most common hoverfly you might actually come across would be this one here, which is the marmalade hoverfly. A very common hoverfly, but don't worry, you don't have to identify them to species level, just pop them into the group. And then we have other flies. So these are all the other fly species or that don't fall under the hoverfly group. So they can consist of like dung flies, fruit flies, etc. So many of our common hoverflies will have some sort of stripe markings, but another thing, a lot of flies will have these very hard strong black hairs that are basically very bristly. Whereas hoverflies will, I'll just go back here, will have kind of more softer hairs. You can see here with the bee mimic hoverfly that their hair is quite soft, whereas with other flies they can have really strong bristly like hair. And they won't demonstrate that ability to hover in the air above flowers as well. So of course, butterflies and moths are going to be grouped together. So that's fairly handy. And then of course, with the same beetles that are larger than 3 millimeters, they're all will be grouped under the beetle group. So, you know, ladybirds, soldier beetles, that sort of thing. So any small insects that are less than 3 millimeters long, you don't need to identify them. You just pop them under small insects. So this will include any tiny flies, aphids, and beetles that are absolutely tiny. You can put them into the small insect group. So you can see here with some of the pollen beetles, they're absolutely tiny. And you don't need to tell them apart, as I said, but you know, you can group them under the small insects. And then finally, we have the other insects. So anything like shield bugs, sawflies. So sawflies very much look like wasps, but they don't have a waist. You can see they're nearly completely straight, so there's no distinct waist there. So don't be too worried about, you know, oh, what group should I be putting this insect in? You know, if you're just starting off, give yourself a little bit of grace. If you're not 100% sure what group to put an insect in, you can always put them into other insects. So we want you to be able to count all the insects you see on the target flowers. But if you can't confidently put them into another group, you can put them into other insects. So that's the insect group. So your 10 minutes are done. Hooray. So the next thing we'd ask you to do is then record your habitat. So is it a garden, farmland, hedgerow? So we have a list of different habitats, but if where you're doing your FitCan doesn't fall under any of those habitats, we do have an other category, and you just type in your habitat type. So for example, grey dune, or you know, wet grasslands, you know. In terms of weather, we would ask you to just collect some information on the weather. It's very simple, and it's all built into the app, and it's on the recording form as well. So we just ask you to note the cloud cover, you know, how much wind was blowing through the 10 minutes, and the amount of sunshine that would be falling on your patch of flowers. And it could be something very simple as, you know, the amount of sunshine. Was there no sunshine that hit your plot? There was some sunshine, or it was all in sun. As I mentioned before, if you carry out several fit counts in the same location, you can add more value to your data as well. So this is the final thing you'd have to do. So it's submitting your counts. So using the app, you upload your count afterwards. If you don't have internet access, that's completely fine. You can wait till you get home and then you can upload your count once you access the internet. If you're using the recording form, you can submit your count online at records.biodiversityireland.ie. And all the information that you would have filled out on the recording form you just have to input it into that form that we have online. And just to kind of make a note, zero counts are still useful. If you do fit counts and there's absolutely no insects visiting, that's still really important information to have. So don't be disheartened at the first, like if there's a couple of fit counts where you're just not seeing anything at all. It can be very common even in during April, but don't worry if you don't get a lot of insects or no insects at all. We can still use that data. So that's the fit count overview. I just want to kind of go into some of the information that we've collected from last year. So this is the 2025 overview, and this map is all the fit counts that were submitted to us last year. So around just over 1,300 fit counts were submitted compared to 784 counts in 2024. So a massive jump, which was fantastic to see. We had 235 people submit fit counts, either by themselves or as part of groups or as part of businesses. We even had some schools as well submit records. So we had over 12,000 insects counted compared to just over 5,000 in 2024. And the most common insect group was other flies, whereas in 2024, I think it was hoverflies. So this can change year on year. So what months were most fit counts carried out on? So you can see it was the same since 2022 and 2021 that June, July tend to be the most common months that people will submit the most records, and that's just because it's an active time of year for a lot of insects as well, and there's a lot of flowers blooming. You can see there's usually a little dip in September, and this is quite common just because there isn't much flowering, and it could be easily that maybe it's ivy or a knapweed that's just flowering in your area, but it would be lovely to be able to get more fit counts submitted for the September period. So this pie chart on the right hand side is just a breakdown of the different groups of insects that were counted for the month of July. And you can see bumblebees, hoverflies, other flies were the most common groups, which makes sense because it is the height of the active period for most of our bumblebee and hoverfly species. So in terms of habitats, garden narrowly beat grasslands with wildflowers, which was interesting because last year it was grassland with wildflowers that were the most common habitats that people used. But you can see here a list of different habitats that we have listed. So amenity grassland, parkland with trees, farm crops, hedgerow edges, even waste ground, churchyards, and you can see the other category here. So that's any other habitats that wouldn't fall under any of these categories. So just to break this down a bit more for the gardens, you can see bumblebees, hoverflies, other flies again are the most common groups. In terms of, this is actually quite nice to see because gardens could actually act as important little pit stops for bumblebees during their active season. So if you have a nice variety of different flowers as well, it can be a nice way to be able to support the bees in your local area. In terms of target flowers, dandelions were the most common, followed by buttercup and then the clovers. But you can see here all the list of the target plant species here. We wouldn't expect too many fit counts on white dead nettles just because it's not as common as the other groups, as the other plants there. And again, just to break down the dandelion visits, so majority of it is actually flies and then small insects, which makes sense because dandelion have a nice kind of open floral structure. It's easy to access the pollen and nectar for insects that might have kind of shorter tongues or shorter mouth parts compared to, let's say, some bumblebees where they might have longer tongues and that they can visit kind of more tubular flowers. And then, yeah, other flies are the most common group, followed by hoverflies and bumblebees. So you can see there's a nice representation of all the groups here right throughout the year. So if you want any more information, please visit our website. There's also a YouTube video to help you go through the whole kind of process for the fig counts. And just before I finish, I just want to let you know that we're actually currently hiring. So if you're interested or if you know anyone who's interested, please share the link for a pollination monitoring post for moths or a pollination monitoring research assistant for Northern Ireland. So for more details, please visit this website. And that's me. I will stop sharing now.
Thanks, Michelle. Can you bring yourself on screen as well for the Q&A, please?
There we go.
Perfect, ideal. So as you mentioned, today is the first day for the fig counts to start, but could you maybe just reiterate maybe the time period and how frequently people can do it?
Yep. So the time period for the fig counts is from April to September, and you can do it as little or as often as you'd like. You could, if you're, let's say, doing it as part of an action plan, you could even do it every week. You could do it once a month. It's completely up to yourself. It's great to have numerous fig count records for one site as well, because that'll just make it easier to track your progress if you're doing measures to help pollinators in your area. Because if you register, you can actually download all your data in one CSV file so that you have ready access to your data that you can use.
Yeah, it's actually great how flexible it is as well. You have the option of the app or you have the option of a form or on the biodiversity citizen science portal as well. I think you might have actually just answered my first question. That was you know, kind of how as community groups or as organizations can you look at the impact that you're having. So you were saying you can download that data as well. Yeah, perfect.
And if you want to kind of keep it all neat, you can, when you register for online, if you use maybe, let's say, a group email like, you know, Clonmel Tidy Towns email account that all your members have access to. So when they do a fig count as part of this Tidy Towns group, you can submit all your data. So all the data for the Tidy Towns initiative would be in one place that you can download all at once.
Perfect. And so I'll just jump into the questions then in the Q&A. So someone asked, how can I best assist pollinator monitoring programs?
I'd say the best way you can do is actually to get involved. Fig counts are an excellent way to do it. It's simple, easy. You could do it during a lunch break. I tend to do fig counts a lot when I'm having a cup of tea. But like if you want, you could do fig counts, but you could also get involved with a lot of our other monitoring programs as well. So we have the bumblebee monitoring scheme and the butterfly monitoring scheme. So where you'd set up a 1 kilometre fixed route and you'd walk that once a month. So I'd say the best way to support monitoring is to actually just get involved. And thank you for that question. It's nice to see that people are interested in wildlife monitoring.
Yeah, and I think the fig count's a great way to get started with any type of monitoring as well. And what I'll do is I'll just pop into the chat. So on our website, we do have a list of the different monitoring schemes that we have going on, but we also have an online learning platform. So that will actually go into more details on how to identify different species. So for example, we have ones on some solitary bees, some wasps as well, and different species. And we have ones specifically for schemes like the butterfly as well. So I'll pop that into the chat in a minute. But let me just pull up the Q&A. We're getting some great questions in.
Oh, brilliant.
And just say that the app is called the Fig Count app, isn't it?
It is indeed, yeah. So we have the links to download the app on the Fig Count website. So once you download, it'll bring you to the UK pollination monitoring scheme. But they were the people who came up with the app, but it has, as long as you select Ireland, you'll be fine. Oh, that actually reminds me, if you're based in Northern Ireland and you're doing fig counts in Northern Ireland, you can still use the app, but your fig counts will feed into the UK pollinator monitoring scheme.
That's actually great, because that was one of the questions that came up, Michelle.
Yeah.
But getting ahead of it again.
Oh,
That's
Gina.
good. Okay, so perfect. Just jumping into the Q&A. Someone asks, is within a standard garden considered to be within the same general area for fig counts over a season? So like if you do it in the same area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It can be in the same, let's say if you want to track progress in your garden, you can do it anywhere in your garden. You can choose different flowers for each of the fig counts throughout the season. It doesn't have to, you don't have to stick to, let's say, dandelion in your garden throughout the season. You can select different flowers, which would be very beneficial. But yes, yeah, anywhere in your garden.
Just following on from that, I know you were saying you can do it anywhere in the garden and pick different plants, but is there value in repeating the same patch?
There is value in, most certainly there's value in that. But again, if it's in a kind of finite area, you'd still get just as much useful information out of that as well.
Yep, perfect. And this is a question I had when I first started doing fig counts as well, is can you use shrub as well as flat plot of ground?
You can indeed. So with your plot, you can have it horizontal on the ground, or you can actually hold it up vertically as well. So you can use tree species, you can use hawthorn, blackthorn, if you have bird cherry, any of the flowering tree species, or any shrubs, by all means, you can use you can just pop up the plot on that. Yeah.
So that might kind of lead into the next question of, do you have to throw the codrat? Does it need to be a random sample, or can you place it where you want to?
You can place it where you want. So you place it wherever there's plants blooming. And the most important thing is when you do place your plot that you take a photo of the whole patch and you only focus on one plant species at a time.
Perfect. And at the start, when we were going through kind of when is the best time to do one, you mentioned that, you avoid doing it on cold days. I suppose, can you explain maybe why you'd want to do it in warmer or kind of clear days?
Yeah, so if you're doing it during a cold day, there's only going to be a very small number of insects that will actually be active. So, for example, you will have bumblebees out, but you won't have any other insects, and it would bias your results. So if you have it on warm, kind of dry days, it doesn't really matter in terms of the cloud cover, just as long as it's warm enough to do the fig count. You'll still get a nice group of insects that'll all be active at that time. But it's just if it's cold, you might only get maybe the odd bee, or you would be quite biased in your results. So it's important to do it during warm and dry weather.
Perfect. And we were asked, what are the common mistakes that you see happening? I know you go through and you validate all of the records that come through as well. And I suppose people are wondering, is there anything they could do to correct their mistakes after they submit it?
Yeah, so what you can do is you can email me. My email is on the fig count website. If you submit your account and you're like, oh, sugar, I actually made a mistake, it wasn't that plant species, you can email me and I can make note of it and I can change it for you. There is some limited editing availability on your profile. So if you submit your app or your count through the app and you go onto your profile, you can do some small editing, but you wouldn't be able to change out photos. And just actually to let you know that you can submit numerous photos, but I suppose the most common mistakes people would make would be maybe not taking a photo of the entire plot. And sometimes people can sometimes mistake flowers like hawkbits with dandelions, which, to be honest, the flowers nearly look exactly identical, but with dandelions, they'll have that kind of hollow stem, whereas the hawkbits, hawkbeards would all have kind of quite strong, kind of solid stems. But we do have some on the newsletter on the website for the 2025, I do go through some tips and tricks and some common mistakes people would have made. But like, if you realize that you've made a mistake, that's no bother at all. You can always just get in touch with me and I'll rectify it for you. So no
Perfect.
worries. Yeah.
And the link to that web page as well has been shared in the chat. But even if you just go on to our website, you'll be able to find information on the fit
Yeah.
count there as well. And actually, just on that, you were saying kind of people might mistake different species. We do have the target list of species, but you can choose a plant that is not necessarily on that list.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually the most common plant species that people pick that are outside the target group would tend to be like something like Devis biscabius, catmint, because a lot of people might have catmint in their garden, or any ornamentals that might be in little hanging baskets or flower beds, that sort of thing. So if you can't find any of the target plant species, other plants are completely fine. I'd say the kind of the main thing I would ask people to do is just go out and try fit counts. Don't be worrying about, oh, sugar, am I identifying this plant correctly? Or I don't know what insect this is. If you're not sure of the insect, you can always put it into the other category. Recording it is the most important thing. And I can see this from the data, and then what I can do is I can update our tips and tricks to help people in the next year as well.
Thanks, Michelle. So is there a minimum amount of quadrat counts to do per patch of land that you survey?
No, you can do as many or as little as you want. Let's say if it's a patch of land, for example, farmyard or farmland, you can do maybe a fit count along the hedgerow, and you can do one in the middle of the field. You can actually, even if you're coming into the farmyard and there's a small little patch of flowers growing up by the gate, you can even do a fit count there at like the location. Makes no difference, and the number of times you do the fit counts is completely up to yourself. More is nice though. No.
When it comes to monitoring, that's always the way.
Yeah. More is key.
So someone asked just around, I suppose, wasps and the potential to sting. People obviously like to go out and do these surveys with their kids. Would you have any advice on maybe just kind of how to be safe when doing any of the surveying?
Yeah, so what you could do as well is, when you're doing the plot, from what I mentioned before, don't cast your shadow over the plot. But if you want, you can always step a bit back if you're kind of wary of wasps. And you could even, if you want, you could even use a pair of binoculars if you want, so that you're kind of a good distance away. But if you want to do it with your kids and you want to make sure that they're safe, that could be a nice way. You could just step a bit back from the plot. As long as you can still see the plot, it's completely fine. So in terms of wasps, so with the social wasps, they do tend to get a bit more boisterous towards the end of the year, but during the kind of the summertime, they don't tend to be as aggressive. But again, I can understand wasps can be quite scary, especially the social wasps. So yeah, you can step away from the plot, just as long as you can still see the insects, that's completely fine. You can use a pair of binoculars.
I would say obviously your safety doing any type of monitoring is the utmost important. So if you do have any allergies to bee stings, then just to keep that in mind as well. Perfect, thank you. So the next question is, do other insects hover? As in, because we said that hoverflies naturally, as their name says, but are there other species that hover that they could be mistaken for?
That they wouldn't be mistaken for, but I have seen some moth species that look like they can hover. So we have a moth species, you should look it up, absolutely stunning. The hummingbird hawk moth. So they basically, if you see them from a distance, they do look like hummingbirds, and they do kind of do that hovering motion, but you would be able to easily tell them apart from the hoverflies. It's kind of more important just to be able to tell the difference between hoverflies and other flies and bees. But if you look at the antennae, so the hoverflies have short, stubby antennae. Sometimes they might actually have some feathers on them. And also the eyes would take up the majority of their head. So especially when it comes to bee mimics, they can be very, very good at mimicking bees, even the flight pattern of them. So those two characteristics will help you tell them apart from bees. And then with other flies, it would be kind of more the hovering aspect. But keep an eye out for the hummingbird hawk moth. Stunning, stunning moths.
It's beautiful. And just with that, if you can't identify a solitary bee or a fly, or if you're not too sure, you're kind of like, oh, it looks like a mimic, it could be it. Are you worth recording it? Do you not record it?
Yeah, if you're not 100% sure, you can always put into other insects. You can also take a photo if you want as well, and you can submit insect photos and make a little note. But you can, if you're really not sure, you can always put it into the other insect category. It's better to have the record than not to have the record.
Perfect. So sorry, just going through
Yeah,
more
of
of the
course.
questions, more have come in, which is always great to see. So someone asked, how can we avoid double counting the same insect?
Yeah, so when it comes to bees, it's easy enough. So if there's not a lot of insects flying around, if you see a bumblebee visit the dandelion and then leave the pot, you can always keep an eye on them. If they're staying around, they might accidentally come back into the plot. Now, just to reiterate, if don't be too worried if there's a lot of insects to be able to try and keep track of. It'll happen that maybe there could be cases of double counting, but it's really hard to know. Like you won't be able to follow all the little midges that are flying in and out of the pot. You'd drive yourself mad. So just do what you can. It's a very forgiving survey, so
yeah.
The best thing to do is just start, and if there's
Give it a go.
and if there's any questions that do come up during the survey season, by all means send me an email and I can help you.
So Alice asks, is the wind assessment as it presents in general, or is it the microclimate where the flower is present?
So you would assess kind of the wind after you've done the fit count. So it's basically the amount of wind that's blowing through the plot during your 10 minutes. So it would be under three kind of measurements. So there was little to no wind, there was some wind, and there was heavy gusts going through the plot. So you can select one of those. So you don't need to put them onto the Beaufort scale, which measures wind force. It's just under three relatively easy assessments for scales.
Someone asks, any advice on a system to mark your exact locations on a map or GPS for repeating?
Yeah, so in the app, once you click Start Survey, it'll actually take your location, and so the location will appear on the app. If you're using the recording form, you could use Google Maps, so that you could just save a little point and take the coordinate. And once you click on that little point that pops up on Google Maps, it'll have the list of the grid there. But when you're submitting it online, you can use our map feature to point out where your fit count was.
So yeah, we just have a few more minutes left, so hopefully we get through another few questions.
Yeah.
So Christopher asks, can a fit count be used for quantitative sampling in research, or does the risk of double counting the same individual prevent this?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, absolutely. So can fit counts be used for quantitative sampling in research, or is the concern of double counting, would that make it not viable?
No, fit counts have been used for research purposes here in Ireland and the UK. So they do tend to be part of kind of like a research study. To be honest, even if you were doing like a fixed route transect, there's still going to be that risk of a bee flying out of your transect observation window and then coming back in. It is a risk, but to be honest, it shouldn't stop people from trying out the fit counts. You can only do what you can. So it's only if there's a lot of bees in the area, that probably would be the time that it would be okay to like, listen, I'm not sure if it's the same individual, but if it's quite if it's quite a quiet plot, sometimes it's easy enough to keep track of, especially bees, because they just hop from flower to flower. They're in their own little worlds, really.
Perfect. So Thomas asks, how would you tackle different number of visits across the years when looking at long-term trends? So is it better to look at monthly averages or?
Um, you can, is this for a particular group or is it overall all the accounts together?
I would say maybe overall, it wasn't specified.
Yeah, so we look at the averages across each month, but also across the year as well. So we had an average number of insects that were counted on the fig counts last year, and that was like 9 insects per fig count, and that was an average counting. So we will look at the averages, but once we build up a really nice data set, a couple of years of data, we should be able to do kind of more statistical analysis on those trends to see what's going on. And because you will get natural fluctuations in insect numbers, but it'll be nice to actually have some data to see, is this part of their natural fluctuation or is it part of an ongoing trend? So the UK have done some work on this, so they've done the fig counts before, or well, they've set up the fig counts before ourselves. They developed it, so they actually have done some statistical analysis, but there's more data that they want to feed into it. But if you want to actually have a look at what they've done with their fig counts, you can go onto their UK Pollinator Monitoring Scheme website, and they have a report there. So there's quite a lot you could do with this type of information, and they have found like this information is quite useful to track their changes in the numbers of these flower visiting insects. So averages are fine for reporting, but after a while we should be able to do more in-depth analysis.
Okay, I think we have time for one last question. Quick
Okay,
question.
dogs.
Would shady part of the garden be useful to survey? How about walls covered in ivy, for example?
You can do walls covered in ivy. That's completely fine as long as the ivy is flowering. Shady parts are fine. To be honest, anywhere in your garden where there's plants flowering, just as long as the shady part isn't coming from your shadow, should be okay. But yeah, you can do fig counts on walls if there's plants growing out of walls. That's completely fine. You can literally anywhere where there's flowering and it's safe to do so. Please, by all means, try the fig count there.
Perfect. We're just coming up to 1 o'clock, Michelle, so we might wrap up there.
Okay,
We did have a lot of questions ahead of time, actually, about kind of how can you help pollinators throughout the year. So we didn't have time to address them here in the Q&A, but I am going to link a few resources. So these are general ones of how can you help your garden and your community. And these are all from the All Ireland Pollinator Plan. And we also have a link to a business guide as well. So I'm just going to pop that into the chat as well.
Great. I hope you all got some inspiration from the presentation, but thank you all for listening.
Yes, so we're up to 1 o'clock now, so I think we'll wrap up. But again, thank you everyone for taking time to join us today, and we hope it's been useful. If you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch, and happy monitoring. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.